Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grain Market Blast. It is Tuesday, the 22nd of April, all day. And as usual, the wonderful Angie Setzer will be providing a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news for agricultural markets. But before she does, pardon me, I will get the legals out of the way. So, as usual, nothing discussed on this basis session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ or indeed the hosts, which, as you know by now, is myself, Mr. Ryan Paisley, and the wonderful, the magnificent, the resplendent Mrs. Angie Setzer. Angie, how are you,
Aw,
my love?
you're just so sweet. I'm good. Happy
Oh, stop it.
Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
That's what yesterday, well, you like after we got done, and I'll make this quick, but I came down with like the world's shortest but worst stomach bug, honestly.
Oh,
Like, yeah, mothers should not be allowed to get sick. So I basically parked on the couch. Didn't miss much though. So good news. I'm back though, ready
but
to
you're feeling
rock.
better now, right? That's the
Yes,
most important
yes,
thing.
definitely. Thank
Perfect.
goodness. It was crazy. But anyway, we're good. And I didn't miss much. I feel like the weirdest thing in this market right now is like there's a ton of moving pieces or a ton of things that you have to kind of be paying attention to. But have you seen any new developments in any of those over the last 24, 72 hours, really, to speak of? Not really.
No, not really. I
I
think in it, I think we've still seen it's, again. It's the same like drip feeding of headlines seems to be
yes,
occurring. India is one I know we definitely want to watch because, as we said yesterday, you kind of result if Trump resolves the India trade dispute, then it looks like he's also going to be leveraging India against China. As we know
yes,
that the Indians and the Chinese share quite a lengthy border, and they genuinely, I'm not just saying this, they do genuinely throw stones at each other because
yes,
because
yes,
if they used weapons and it escalates. So I think both parties, both sides, I'm not making this up, both sides are kind of under the instructions that yes, you can throw sticks and stones.
yes.
So it'd be interesting to see how that plays off against each other. And obviously we got China making moves to kind of solidify Southeast Asia and kind of going like
Yep.
it's us versus them. But yeah, it's one of those
It's
that there's been no outright kind of movement, but there's just still the drip feeding of headlines.
lots of things. And so yeah, that's exactly what we're paying attention to today is we did see something come out yesterday. It was, I will say, a little disappointing from Japan, or if you were in the administration anyway, and saying that trade deals are going to be coming rapidly and quickly could be disappointing. We had seen over the weekend there that Japan would look to increase their rice and soybean imports and some of these other things. But Japan, their prime minister came out yesterday and said, listen, our concessions are only going to go so far. We have
Yeah.
so many things, we're not going to sacrifice agriculture for the auto industry. Like we'll just stimulate the auto industry. And so that's one of the things that I think we're kind of seeing,
Just
Vietnam. Yeah, go
just
ahead.
on that just on
Yeah.
that as well, so this was an old one as well. It's another case of Trump saying stuff that just doesn't make sense because he was accusing Japan of weakening the yen,
Yes.
but
It's actually gotten stronger.
and then the Japanese have come around and go, well, hang on a second, we've actually
Yeah.
been strengthening we've been stepping, they're like,
Yes.
yes, you're right, we've been stepping into the market, but that's to strengthen it. And it's
Yes.
so yeah, I think that's why they feel a bit kind of aggrieved that hang on, we're being accused of something we've definitely not that we've not been
Yes.
doing it, we've been doing the opposite.
We've been willing to work with you from day one. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I think there was a little bit of a pushback there from Japan where it was like, listen, we will move, we will do what we need to do, but we're not going to break our backs and we're not going to sacrifice one industry for another. We've got what Vietnam's trade deal is, they're working on a package. Their prime minister said to their team to put together a great package in the hopes that they'll cut their lofty reciprocal rates. South Korea will be in town on Thursday. Thailand had hoped to travel to DC, but has been told they can't until they address issues related to their trade. So, you've got all of these little pieces here and there. But I think you are starting to see this sort of realization amongst some of these global economies that, to hell with this. Like we're fighting against something we don't even know what we're fighting against. Like we could spend money, we could sacrifice, we could increase our investments in the US, we could do all of these different things, or we could say to hell with them, we could stimulate our own economy. We can kind of work to make sure that we're putting investments into what we need to be investing, yada, yada, yada. And so we're getting a little bit of which you would expect. Everything is always on a pendulum. We're always working out emotions in trade. We're always dealing with people as a whole and what
Yeah.
they're going to do. And so I feel like we may start to see this little shift on the pendulum where it's like, wait a minute, maybe we aren't going to put these deals together. Maybe these countries are going to give us the finger to a certain extent, or maybe they're going to put out a package and say, here, this is what we're willing to do. You take it or you leave it. And, so there's this conversation right now where it's like, what does the administration do with this? do we start to see, and this is what I think you start to see, little wins being spun as huge wins. And we need deals put out. Maybe I'm completely wrong in
Yep.
that, but that's where we're at. The bull market needs to be fed every day. We always talk about that. And
Yep.
so, in this instance here, if people are looking forward to trade deals being done and done quickly, they need to start happening. And
Yes.
so we've got the negotiation between the US, the EU, Britain, others. Mexico's president said that they had a great phone call, Trump and Xi, last week, but that nothing had been solidified. And then a lot of people have made this huge to do about China being like, hey, if you guys work with the US and you hurt our interests, then we're going to hurt your interests. And a lot of people are like, oh my God, China's serious. Like the US said that 10 days ago. What is
Yeah.
it? Why is it a big deal of China? So anyway, trade negotiations and lack of progress or significant progress, whatever that may be. We did see them come out and speak highly of the India meeting. Vance and Modi met, and Modi's is still kicking, so we got that going for us. And which is better. Anyway,
I mean, we're not. It's not that we're setting the bar low, but that's a pretty low
that's what
bar.
he's and he's happy with it. I'm sure. If I were Modi, I'd be breathing a sigh of relief. But so anyway, then we have the outside market worries, and a lot of people will be like, "Why the hell does that matter to grains? Everything matters to grains." And so we have this real big blow to confidence, or we've seen it. There's a lot of talk about President Trump, taking shots at Jerome Powell. He called him a major loser yesterday or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
Powell, really, for real? Like you put him in that.
I
Anyway,
was going to say, people need to remember that it was Trump that ousted Yellen in favor of
put
Powell.
Powell
Yeah.
in. And he's done arguably a great job. He's had two
Well,
mandates. Go
whisper
ahead.
it because I completely agree with you here. But every time I say it out loud, I get
People yell.
ostracized. So
I did say arguably. So it's one of those things where
there's your caveat.
you can say no, but he's managed through COVID. He managed through the post-COVID recovery. We kind of have, somehow we haven't really landed, but we haven't had a hard landing
No, I
necessarily,
agree. I agree.
And so we were doing okay. And now we've introduced what is erratic trade policy. And you can argue until the cows come home that it's not erratic, but excuse me, April 2nd, April 9th, delays, not delays, who's doing what, where, who's on first.
Yeah.
It's erratic. And so to have Powell sit here and, basically he said, the quiet part out loud, which is like,
Yeah.
bro, you are what's causing this. Like, if it weren't for this uncertainty, and you have to also realize that the problems that these other countries are facing, or the things that they're making move wise from a monetary policy standpoint, to see the ECB cut rates and some of these other ones, like they are reacting to your policy. We
Yeah.
have to react to your policy differently because we are the dealer of the policy. We are not the recipient of the policy. And so there's different things happening there. And so you can argue all you want about whether or not he should be in place, whether or not he should be cutting rates, whatever. But Powell and the Fed have always been viewed as independent of politics. And
Yeah.
so if you start to see the Fed be swayed by political persuasion, and if you agree with it now, that's cool. But think of it when the shoe is on the other foot, differently. Like we have to remember that there are certain things out there that are kind of unspoken rules to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And so to see, not only this sort of, the reciprocal tariffs and the whole entire sort of turning the global economy and trade relationships, and you can argue, yes, eventually it's going to be all worth it, but we're still working through the hardest parts of it.
Yeah.
So to have that happen and then to say that you're going to pull Powell out, who has been doing well in his position, it's just really kind of reiterating the sell American trade. The dollar was lower, equities were lower, rates are elevated, those types of things. And so we're
Yeah.
just kind of watching, just the dynamics, not only of the administration, because Bessent and Powell are good friends. Or at least great cohorts. Apparently, they have like breakfast together, standing breakfast, sort of, like they.
No.
So it's an interesting dynamic that you have to be paying attention to, and is something that matters. So and then the last point, just other news stuff that we would actually be focusing on. If it were in a quote unquote normal time period, you know what I mean? We didn't have trade, we didn't have outside markets, uncertainty, and some of these other things. And we'd really just be watching export inspections. We'd be watching weather, planting pace, what's going on in South America. And so, yeah, yesterday's export inspections continue to show a strong shipping pace. Corn, soybean, and wheat shipments were above the pace needed to meet USDA numbers. Corn shipments came in above trader expectations again, and about 21 million bushels above the weekly number needed each week to meet the USDA projections. So we're still shipping corn. We're going to continue to ship the hell out of corn for a while. Soybean shipments, decent, but are going to start to slow down seasonally. Wheat shipments, same. decent, but we're about 6 weeks away from the end of the marketing year there, and waiting for new crop to come on board. Planting pace, we're slightly ahead of average in both corn and soybean plantings, which we figured. Last week we saw really strong pace in the Western Corn Belt where it was a bit drier. So the Western Corn Belt, for those of you who aren't familiar, you'll hear me start to say Western Corn Belt, Eastern Corn Belt, and maybe it's super clear, but if you're, in the UK, for instance, and are
Like
like,
me.
what the hell? Just basically the Mississippi River. East of it's the Eastern Corn Belt, west of it's Western. So we're a
There you
simple
go.
industry. We don't try to make things complicated, but you'll see, we've got two very distinct or different weather forecasts coming up, as we work into the summer. A few things that we'll be paying attention to. It does look like this week will be a little bit slower for planting progress, just because, weather wise, we're expecting some rain in the west and some in the east. But for the most part, it does look like we'll dry out as we work into May. Conditions across South America look good. Folks are kind of bumping up their safrina production estimates, so that's something to keep in mind. It still doesn't mean that the pipeline is going to be full of Brazilian corn, much before August, but it does look like they could have maybe a couple 3 to 4 million metric tons of extra corn to export that we weren't expecting here, even 6 weeks ago when they started out pretty dry. So something to watch there. Argentina farmer selling still pretty slow. Lots of worries about inflation as they've, devalued their currency, and no one's really sure. Everyone's optimistic, but again, just like with what we're going through with trade and all of these other things, like you can be optimistic on what happens when we get to the end, but it can sure as hell be pretty bumpy in the meantime.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're seeing in Argentina. It's keeping farmers from selling. And so, yeah, market wise today, feed grains are lower. Corn's a lot lower here starting out. New crop corn's down about 5. Beans are up. New crop beans look like they'll be a bit lower. And weather-wise, like I said, it does look like we won't see too awful many major planting concerns, at least at this point. Yeah, the next 10 days will be a little wet. But then after that, it looks like we should see reasonable progress through the month of May. And we'll just be paying attention to trade negotiations, see if we can get that first deal. The first one's the hardest one, right?
Yeah, and yeah, exactly that. And I do feel that once we get, like I say, one of the majors that way, be it South Korea, be it India, be it even the UK, because obviously these are the three that kind of got in contact with Trump first, so they are getting preference. It feels to me that once we get one sorted, I think a lot of the other people will fall in line. I mentioned this morning on this morning's podcast, the morning blast that we do daily, that it feels like the wildebeest that are kind of on the edge of the river, and they're just everyone's waiting for the first one to jump before they
Right.
all jump. Yeah,
Yeah.
because obviously everyone's worried about this giant like crocodile that's waiting for them. So I think when we do see one nation go, then we'll likely see a few more follow suit, and also using the agreed framework, because as you said before, one of the issues we have is these nations that are trying to come up with a trade plan. They're like, well, hang on, can you stop moving the goalpost for a second, and then we can sort something out. So I think
Yeah.
once one country does manage to pin Trump down to say, like, okay, this works for us, this works for you, then a lot of other nations are going to go, well, hang on, well, let's use that framework and we'll do similar.
Yes, I agree, and I'm hopeful that we also get a point person name for the China negotiations too. It'd be
Yeah.
nice to see some progress there. And I'm my fingers crossed it's Greer and not Lutnick. But that's just personal preference.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
And so yeah, we'll be watching to see what, if any, deals come up. And yeah, honestly, today's going to be pretty slow from a news standpoint. We don't typically
Yeah.
get much in the way of big news inputs on Tuesday, and so we'll see if we get some trade deals or some progress made
Well,
there.
we do just whilst we've been, I'm not sure
Yeah,
how, well, the thing is people kind of conflate headlines, so just be very careful on this. But I did see a headline just now that's saying terms are being agreed with India on a trade deal. But I've got a feeling this might be a rehash of a previous headline that we
it
saw
is.
where
Yeah,
they were, yeah, okay, yeah, I thought so.
you gotta
I was
love
like,
it.
see, look, yeah, you got to be really careful, because what they're saying is the framework is in place, and
Yes.
now they've got to kind of, yeah. So look, like we said, hopefully it is India going to be first, because that'll be quite a major one, especially to leverage China. But yeah, wait and see, I guess.
Yeah. We'll see which one goes first. But the India stuff looks good. Probably going to be a great opportunity for energy exports more
Yes,
than
yeah,
anything. It looks like.
LNG especially. Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so yeah, we'll see what the day brings. We'll be back tomorrow with bells on, and yeah, hopefully talking about some sort of progress with something.
Awesome. Well, Angie, thank you so much as always for being your wonderful self. Listeners, I know I always say this, but we really do appreciate you listening in. And hopefully we'll hear you. Well, you'll hear us tomorrow. Take care.
Yes. Have a good one.